Hey guys, welcome back to the Tuning into Tompkins Orchestra podcast. I'm your host Rithik Ulas and I'm joined by my co-host
Vicky.
and today we are joined by Tyler Arcari, the Director of Music Production and Editing at Excelsior Music Publishing, as well as several other publishing corporations. He's a notable conductor and the composer of one of our Midwest Clinic pieces, A Christmas Tiding. Mr. Arcari, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks to you both, and obviously the orchestra for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course.
So, the first question we wanted to ask you is, can you describe your creative process and how you go through making a piece of music?
One of my favorite things about being a composer is getting asked this exact question. And the reason I find it so fascinating is because I think a lot of times there's an interesting mystique about what we do. And to a degree, I think obviously, lots of time spent writing music is going to give you tools to write music either better, faster, or different. But I do think sometimes there's a bit of a guardrail that we inadvertently put on that maybe will block other people from attempting to write music. So the first thing I always like to do when I get asked this question is sort of try and demystify it, which is that the process to writing music involves a lot of study, and it's something that everybody can do. So if you ever want to write music, if you're ever interested in writing music, you are 100% capable of doing so. The caveat, obviously, is you have to be okay with the fact that sometimes the music that you write, which is beautiful and wonderful, is something that only you or a few other people want to listen to. And sometimes the music you write is something that everybody wants to listen to. And then sometimes it's a little bit of both. And that's okay because we write music first and foremost for ourselves. So I always like to get that out of the way for this question. My personal process is very boring. And that's the reason why I do that beginning bit. I started out writing arrangements for my college ensemble and marching band. And one of the things that you had to do was you'd get a phone call in the middle of the night, and they'd be like, tomorrow we have a performance. We need this chart arranged for this ensemble. And you would have to drop what you were doing and as fast as you can write. And so I sort of developed my writing skills and style out of a need to fit a deadline. And to this day, I still sort of do, whether I impose my own deadline or I have a deadline for a commission or a gig. That's kind of my inspiration to start. After that, the process is pretty easy. It depends on the piece, so that's a non-answer for you. It could be melody, it could be theme, it could be a bass line, it could be one note. I could walk over to the piano and accidentally trip and then hit a chord, and that's like, ooh, that's a cool chord, and then let's go from there. But the end-all, be-all is that it's usually I take the skills of what I've learned from other people's writing music, other things I've studied by way of scores, and then I use that skill to fit my deadline. So that's kind of my process.
Yeah, and when you're doing these kind of pieces, do you feel like you have any kind of compositional signature? Like when you're writing all these pieces, do you feel like there's some kind of idea that you always end up coming back to?
Yeah, so you're asking me if I have like a voice. Like, I there's a couple composers, I won't name them here because they might not like the fact that they have a voice, but I'm sure you're the same way. You can hear a piece from across the room in an honor group and go, "Oh, I know who wrote that." I think that's a great thing, but one of the things that one of my composition teachers taught me, he said something to me one time that stuck with me. He goes, my favorite composers are the ones that are like chameleons. They can write any style for any ensemble, for anything, and you never know who they are, but it's always good. And while I don't think I've hit that yet, that's kind of where I try to go. Unfortunately, I'm sure I have a sound and things. I know one of the things I get made fun of for, especially in A Christmas Tiding, there's a little lick. It's a little 16th note lick. I believe it's an 8th, 16th, 8th, 16th, 8th, 16th, kind of like a little round right before the key change. If you go find that, that's kind of an unfortunate lick I seem to fall back on when I'm stuck compositionally.
Yeah, and I think because you said that the best composers are like those who can like be like a chameleon. And how do you think that pertains to some of the greats like Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach?
I think what's interesting about those composers is that when we talk about composers nowadays versus composers back then, like Bach, right? Bach was writing every week for a very specific ensemble, for a very specific style, for a very specific like purpose.
Yeah.
But there are instances of his music where he kind of stretches out of his comfort zone and it's magical, right?
Yeah.
It's not exactly what you're expecting of his day-to-day compositions. And Mozart's the same way when they sort of stretch out and do something a little bit unique. And because they were sort of the pioneers, and we still sort of consider them, at least in our Western musical canon, to be like the pioneers of our classical lit, they're kind of creating this need for chameleons, right? Bach didn't really need to be a chameleon. He needed to write his, weekly church ordained piece that he had to fit for the mass, right? That was his thing. So when he branched out, when he would write, that beautiful cello suite, or a fugue that really didn't have much to do with that. It's brilliance. It's genius, but that's sort of because he's not being himself. He's sort of it's kind of like the start of being a chameleon.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially in the cello suites in particular, because I am a cellist and I've not actually learned them, but I've played through some of them. I think some of the notable ones are especially 5 and 6. They hit so hard on the emotional level. It makes you wonder what was he really going through when he was writing that.
Isn't that the endless thing? The nice bit is that you can ask me, and I can give you the horribly mundane answer that it probably really is. I was eating a bag of Cheetos, and I thought this was cool. The best part about Bach and all them is that you can't ask them, so we get to kind of go, oh, I bet it was something really deep. And who knows? It might have been, or they might have just been weirdos, and they had a really good hit. I'm a euphonium player. I'm a wind player, and we played those cello suites, and one of the challenging parts to us is that we can't breathe, right? But we have to breathe. So you can breathe the whole time playing cello. So it's a unique experience of phrasing to try and phrase that work with the hindrance of having to breathe. And it might be worth your time to find a video or two and see how a wind player has to interpret that cello suite versus how a cellist would interpret the suite. And you might glean some, that was cool. That might be something that I can try that might enhance this phrase. Or, well, that was horrible. I feel bad for them. They have to breathe.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that, especially in this full orchestra scene, it's really awesome to see how these wind players and stuff they're so amazing in their own way. And I feel like in orchestra, we're kind of confined to this one sound that when we listen to these other ones, it's so awesome.
Well, I think the same applies when you're in your own band. I just love combining to make a full symphony.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I'm opposite now. When I started out, and no, mind you, I agree with you 100%. The tone, color, timbre of these ensembles, they're unique, they're beautiful, and yes, we kind of get in our own rut about. I hear, especially if you're in string orchestra and growing up in string orchestra only with no winds, and you hear the same sort of string timbre that there's advanced techniques that we can do to change the color, but generally it sounds like string instruments. I started out in band as a kid, and right now I'm in love with the string orchestra. I'm in love with trying to figure out how I can make unique, colorful sounds with that limited tone color of the strings themselves. And you really get to, with band you have lots of parts. With full orchestra you have lots of parts. With the string orchestra you have 3 to 5 parts. And so the beauty of the color of that is through space, right? Space of how far apart these are, and how these two instruments sound together in this register or this far apart. And so to me, it's a really fun exploration right now, sort of in opposition to what maybe you're going through. It's still, I think, I agree with you 100%, but I just thought it was interesting that I'm sort of on the other spectrum right now.
Does that also affect like your music listening habits right now? Like, have you been listening to more string arrangements?
Oh, this is going to be the most controversial thing I say on your thing. I don't listen to much music.
Oh.
I don't listen to much music. An unfortunate side effect of my job is I write music, which is really cool, but my main job is I'm an editor at a company that listens to submissions, and I have to decide whether or not I think we can sell that music and produce that music. and then I, make those deals with those composers. And in that process, I'm listening to 1,000 or more submissions a year of various genres, styles, and stuff. So, like, for months, my entire day is nothing but open up a score and an MP3 and listen and evaluate. And so, unfortunately, I think bad side effect of that is that I just don't listen to music too much for enjoyment as much as I used to. Yeah, I can't tell you the last time I sat down and just turned on music. Oh, that's not true. Quincy Jones passed away the other day, and so I listened to Michael Jackson's single that he was responsible for producing. And then I think on Gustav Holst's birthday, I listened to one of the suites. But past that, I really can't think of me just going, let me listen to some music. I listen to a lot of NPR. So.
Oh, the National Public Radio?
Yeah, it's my zone out in the car on the way home to work.
I love
thing,
the National Public Radio. It's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I am sad Audie Cornish has left for CNN, but I listen to her podcast now. So.
Yeah, you mentioned that when you're listening to when you're working for the publishing corporation, you're listening to all of these submissions, and when you're listening to those, what really separates a good piece from a really great piece?
Oh, geez. That's a great question, because I think it always needs to be premised with the fact that while that is 100% the goal for any publishing company, there is a side goal that, as a steward of all this music and people here, I have to decide if it's a great piece of music that I can sell, because there are great pieces of music out there that me personally, as the editor at this company, can't sell enough copies to make it worth it for the composer or the company. That's a hard question to ask me as an editor, because my first and foremost is, am I going to be able to pay the composer's bills and keep the lights on to continue to publish music? Beside that, to me, how do I pick if something is good versus great? That is a whirlwind question. I am going to lean on the fact that I have to use my own musicianship. So one, that's flawed, right? That's my own personal opinion. That's my own personal, would I play this? Would I get excited about hearing this? Would I think my students would enjoy this, or the audience would enjoy this? And then past that, I sort of look at craft, because I also know that first bit is disingenuous to music, right? My own opinion and my own musicianship is one very small step in any piece of music. And beyond that is the composer's talent, and I can't really judge that. What I can judge, and here's where I come in with the whole good versus great, is I judge craft. I'm going to use a primarily wind composer to use this as an example, frankly, because I am not as versed in the string writers to make a educated comment on this, but I will, a very popular wind band composer named Frank DeKelly. I look at his music and I see a masterful amount of craft, tone craft, orchestrational craft, musical ideas craft. I see it all, and it's brilliant usually, right? And so when I am trying to explain what makes a piece good or great, I use him as an example, because whatever you believe about his musical ideas is personal, but you cannot argue the craft behind his writing. His writing is beautiful. Another good example, another wind band composer, Julie Giroux. Same deal, a little bit different medium coming from the film score world. Craft is impeccable, right? Musical ideas, again, I love it, but other people might love a lot of it, love some of it, not like some of it. That's that personal opinion that from the beginning. But what you can't argue is the craft. The craft is masterful. And so that's what I think separates good from great.
And when we're looking at the craft, especially as it pertains to the performance of the music, how much do you think it is dependent on the group that is performing the music, as in their interpretation of what the composer wrote, and how much is it dependent on what the composer actually put in their music?
I love this question too, and I'll go back to Julie, because I had a conversation with her one time, and she said something that I thought was very profound and a very hard thing as a composer to do, which is that once I write a piece of music and I give it to a conductor, it is now up to the musicians and the conductor to interpret that piece of music. And that's not a altruistic type thing. That's a sort of an inevitable realization that you come to as a writer. I will sit in a concert hall and hear my music played all over the country by different groups, different venues, different skill levels, played very well, played very okay, and it will never be how I hear it in my head. It's close. It's really, really close, but it's never exactly how I hear it in my head. And unfortunately, even when I conduct it, it's never quite right. And I don't know if that's because it's a you're always your worst critic sort of thing, or if it's you hear things and just haven't figured out quite yet, like I hear it this way, how do I actually get it on paper to hear it in real life? I don't know, but I thought when she mentioned that, it's a really good rule to live by, but it's very true. So to answer your question, it 100% is going to be determinant on the ensemble and the conductor. And of course, everybody performs certain pieces that have kind of like pushed themselves into the medium as being very popular and well known. There's a very standard way to perform something. But I'll tell you what, sometimes I'll go hear a very well known piece and somebody will take a chance on an interpretation, and it's like a breath of fresh air. You know, your eyes get big and you're like, whoa, I've never heard it done like that before. So I'm gonna bow out as the composer here and say that it's really up to the performers and the conductor.
Yeah, and I think, because especially for myself, and especially in the visual art, I feel like it's a lot of it is dependent on who's watching it. Because when I'm watching a piece of art, I feel like it's so much easier to enjoy it if I'm actually trying to enjoy it. I'm looking for specific things within the art piece that really like pique my interest. And do you think, to what extent does that apply to music?
Well, when you listen to a piece of music, do you expect the composer to tell you a story, or do you want to make a story up on your own?
Well, for me, it depends. There's a combination of both. Depends on what music I'm playing. Especially in concertos, I feel like I want to tell the story, but when I'm hearing symphonic works, I'm really interested in what does the composer want and why did he choose all this instrumentation? Like, why did he choose the French horn to play that part? And how that ultimately contributes to what he was trying to achieve as a whole.
Sometimes when we have a sound we want to get, what instrument can we use that fits that sound that's idiomatic for the instrument? In other words, sometimes things are less playable than they could be for some instruments, and of course there's always somebody out there who can play it, but a lot of times it's due to that. Sort of back to the idea of, what story does a composer want to tell? Because go listen to, if you've never heard of it, go listen to it. It's a piece called Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, written by Penderecki. You listen to that piece and it is a soundscape of horror, and it's emotional and it's dramatic. It's all strings and it's all advanced technique of think like the guy who wrote The Birds, right? Think that old school movie kind of like, violent, a very high tessitura violin sounds. Listen to that piece, listen to the title, close your eyes and really dig into that story. And then afterwards realize that piece had some random mundane title way before he ever tied it to that horrible event in history. That piece was written and done and titled, whatever, Concerto Number 2, and then eventually went, we'll call it Threnody from the Victims of Hiroshima. But that title makes that piece super impactful and meaningful. It gives it life. And so that question of, do you want the composer to give you the story, or are you able to do it on your own, is important as a visual art, right? So like music can be visual because you're forming a story. So it depends. If I'm listening in the audience, sometimes I'll hear what the composer wants me to glean from it, the story they want to tell. I'll listen to that. And then other times I will close my eyes and I will make one up on my own. And if the composer is very talented and good at what they do, that's easy because the music doesn't need a story. You fit that story in there. So that's about the best I can answer that one for a visual art comparison, I think.
What stories have you told through your music?
Well, there's another Midwest group playing a piece of mine called Breakneck, and that's a very easy band piece. But the story I was telling there was my wife wanted a red sports car, and I was terrified. And so that piece, if you listen to it, is a little bit of a soundscape of what my nightmares imagine my wife flying down the road in this little red sports car is, with all the beeps and the hard stops and the swerving and all that stuff. So that's a story I've told.
We're actually performing A Christmas Tiding at the Midwest Clinic, and we were wondering what inspired you to write that song.
So A Christmas Tiding is a mashup of 'Twas in the Moon of Wintertime and God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, which I thought on their own, in three, work really well. They're also minor, and if you put them side by side, they're really darn close. So I thought it'd be a cool mash. But when I grew up, Christmas time to me was a magical time. Like I imagine for some people who celebrate Christmas, it is. But it's also dreary. And the older I get, the time change. Like right now, it's dark, and I'm all sad because it's getting dark right as I'm about to leave work. And so I like fast, mean, aggressive Christmas stuff because everything can't always be rosy cheeked all the time. And so I decided what's fast and aggressive, 7/8 is cool. And I decided I would write a piece with Christmas tunes that I could sort of like harken back to the mysteriousness of like when you walk outside and you see the snow on a street that's dark coming down. You just see it coming like from the street lights. And you look at that and you're like, this is really pretty, and it's cold and it's dark and it's sort of, you're bundled up, it's cozy. But what creepy creature's hiding behind that street lamp? Have you ever been in your house and you turn the lights off to go to bed and you're like, turn them right back on because you just feel like there's something there? I get that little bit of a creepy feeling sometimes, even when there's something pretty and nice. And so that's kind of the idea behind a Christmas tiding, especially the big horn solo in the beginning. It's pretty and it's sort of hinting at the melody, but it's also creepy, intentionally so.
Yeah, I'm scared of everything, so.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think in A Christmas Tiding, I love the 7/8 section there because just that beat of rest and then boom, like the cello part it's like definitely the kind of music that I love to play because it's just, you can go so much into it and it's just such a vibe.
Such a vibe. That's a new one. I've not heard anybody call my music such a vibe.
But it is.
I love it. Thanks.
And when you're composing A Christmas Tiding, going back to kind of the instrumentation part of it, when you're composing for symphony orchestra, how is it different from your string orchestra piece?
Well, what's interesting is I've not done that one for string orchestra, so I don't even know how I would go about writing that just for the string orchestra itself, probably because it relies so heavily on percussion. But funny enough, I haven't written a lot of full orchestra pieces, so I try to marry the two genres that I am familiar with. I write for a good amount of string orchestra by itself, and I write for a good amount of concert band, wind ensembles by themselves. And so I sketch out my limited instrumentation, and I think it's limited. It doesn't sound that way, right? You listen to a full orchestra, it sounds big and full. But to me, on this end, a lot of times it's, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then, of course, the string orchestra is nice and full. But for me, the wind parts are a little bit more thin, and so I have to sort of change my brain a bit and think a lot more about how sound works. And I think it's a deficiency that I'm always trying to get better at. I have to really rely. Now, the string orchestra part is easy because it's like writing for a string orchestra, and for the most part, you want them to sort of take the center stage, and then all the brass and woodwinds are kind of like ancillary, unless they have a moment on their own, right? They're their own little choir. One of the things that I struggle with that I try to be cognizant of when I'm writing is how does the flute part, which is limited, I don't know how many of them I'm going to have, but it's certainly going to be less than the first violin, but how does that complement? And then, instruments like the trumpets who are pointing out into the audience, how is that going to balance with the violas? Or how's that going to balance the cellos with the trombone section if I want to pair them or use them? And so it's a lot of mental gymnastics for me, but I think most of that is just because I'm not as used to writing for that ensemble.
Are there any other genres that you've considered composing for, apart from, string orchestras and bands?
I've done some chamber work, solo work, obviously orchestra and band. I've just written 2 jazz arrangements for the first time ever this year, and I did an original choral vocal work. So I've written for some really weird ensembles and things that people were like, hey, we have this instrument and a piano. Would you write for that? I am back to the deadline thing and gig thing is that I will write for whatever somebody wants me to write for. And then if I have time, I'll write for things that I want to write for. So I think the next thing that I want to try, and of course that's way dependent on other people asking me, is I think it'd be really cool to write for some type of mixed medium like film or, like a documentary where you have to try and write something that is going to get a point across with a very limited amount of time, but you also have to fit it in a very condensed format of you have this much time, you've got a transition right here, you've got to go into this bit, and I think that sounds like a fun, cool challenge, but not really something I can just go do. That's more of I have to fall into that opportunity.
So would you say that making it as a composer in life has a certain bit of luck to it?
Luck? Oh, I think everything in life has a certain deal of luck to it. I mean, that's evident, right? If you could be the hardest worker, the most talented, and there are so many factors that affect you being in the right place at the right time or around the right people, so yes, I do think luck, especially for me, played a role just in my own employment. Because if you ask me how do I get the job that I have right now, I couldn't give you a good answer. There's not many applications out there and people that go, hey, we need one of these, because there's not really a way to learn how to do it. You kind of do it on the fly. So yes, lots of luck. But back to what I said originally, that is not any real roadblock to being a composer, because I mean, success as a writer, or frankly anything you do in life, is personal. You could write one piece of music your entire life, it could get performed once, and you could feel the most success and think, this is it, I've done exactly what I wanted to do. And if that's where you want to go with it, then you can count that as a great success. So yes, luck for me, I don't know if I would call it, prohibitive though.
And so you have the Excelsior Publishing. Do you think that's kind of a way to balance the economic aspect of composing with the creative aspect? Because as a composer, there's a bit of, again, luck involved in, like, if your piece makes it and if it can be commercialized and if you can get the money from it. Is publishing kind of an extra way on the side to get that income, to have that stability?
What's interesting is that I call this the lottery. There are very few people that I know that write music full time, that can support their entire life full time. So if you were to ask me if publishing is a way to make a living, I would say absolutely not, unless you end up being one of the very lucky people that have hit after hit and sell tons of music, and over a long period of time that may turn into being a considerable amount of income, enough to just support yourself or family. Mind you, if that's what you're doing, your health care and all that stuff is stuff you have to take care of. You don't get, that from a job. So you're paying outright for a lot more things than most people. So you have to make a lot more money. However, me personally, I have a day job. That's how I do it. Before this, I was a teacher. That was my full-time gig. And so composing was sort of income on the side. And it takes a long time to build up to where that income on the side is substantial enough to really matter. But I'm not giving up my day job anytime soon, if that makes the answer easier. But again, that goes back to my first thing, is that everybody can write music, and then you have to be okay with whether or not people want to hear it or not. You can take music that people don't want to hear and publish it and promote it, and it still won't sell. So the publishing is a nice way to reliably get your music in front of people, but it's not a guarantee that it's actually going to sell and produce income for you or even the company. And that's why we're always trying to weigh that question when we go to publish a piece on, do we think it's going to pay the bills for the composer and the business? Because otherwise we can't do it. So I'm keeping my day job.
You said you started composing when you were in college?
Actually, I started composing when I was in high school, but I kind of got my voice when I was having to arrange in college. But I started when I was in ninth grade, and I had a composer friend who at the time I didn't know really much what that meant. His name's David Samuel. He's actually one of our composers now. But originally, he was a upperclassman going to one of the community colleges, and he used a program called Finale, which is a musical notation program. And I remember watching him use it one time on a computer and thinking, that's really cool. I want to do that. And so I downloaded the free, I think it was called like Finale Notepad or something like that back in the day. I downloaded the free one and I started plugging stuff in, and I kind of got an itch because I played euphonium in band. I loved playing my instrument, but I also would listen to the altos or the trumpets play cool melody lines and going, I wish I could do that. And so kind of like, writing music was sort of my greedy, I get to do it all sort of thing, because as a euphonium player for a long time, you don't get to play much other than like the tuba parts. So I started writing there, and I remember he came over to my house to listen to a piece of music I wrote, and the piece was aptly titled One, O-N-E, because it was the first thing I ever wrote. And it was awful. It's horrible. If anybody ever found it right now, it would be in my burn if I die file
We
on my
actually have it
computer.
with us right now.
Oh boy, great, don't play it. If you went to that file right now, I'd be completely embarrassed. But the thing about that piece of music was that David looked at me and he said, you know, regardless of all the wrong notes and rhythms and all this other stuff, he said, right here, and he like circled a bit, he goes, right here you had a musical moment. And he's like, and that's the important part about making music. You had a moment right here. And I swear that has stuck with me my entire life, and every piece of music I write, I think back to David in my 9th grade year looking at me, telling me I could do this by telling me that I had a musical moment in a piece. And so every piece I write, I try to have a moment. And that's where I started writing music, was that. And I kind of attribute David to giving me the push.
Yeah, and especially about those musical moments, when I'm playing music or when I'm listening to classical music especially, I've heard all these people talk about the musical journey, but personally, this might be controversial. I've never actually felt that. I've always just felt that moment, and like after that moment, it's just like a little bit of intermission before that next moment. Especially when I'm practicing pieces, I just like play this one part over and over, and I just like, oh my god, that's so cool.
Well, that is brilliant for you, because one of the worst parts for me is once you have that moment, you're always after that next moment, and every time it gets harder and harder to get there. And so I'm always, I think we're all after that high. We're all after that moment of unabashed, you know, where you're playing and then you forget that you're playing. I remember we were playing County Derry, right? Oh Danny Boy, Londonderry Air. We're playing that, and we get to the real big moment, da 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 dee, right in the middle. And I remember completely spacing out, and at the same time, the entire ensemble did, the conductor did, and he played. It was like a 4/4 bar, and he conducted a 5/4 bar of silence, and then we all came in, and it was magical. We all just had the exact same musical moment, and it was brilliant. And so I'm always chasing after that.
Having that happen by complete accident is kind of crazy, I think. And
Oh yeah, it's a good story. We laugh about it. So.
I feel like sometimes that kind of thing just happens because we're a youth orchestra and occasionally we fall apart. But I feel like it might just be me as someone like who's part of the falling apart. But when I'm playing, I feel like, oh my god, like this sounds like it's going amazing. And then our director stops us and he's like, we fell apart. What's happening? And it's like, did we? It's kind of about that perspective, I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we talk a lot about the individual player, and we work very hard to play as an ensemble, but I don't think we've educated people who aren't in a musical ensemble enough about how unexplainable it is that someone, for instance, in the cello section, can be so in tune with someone across the orchestra over in the violin section 3 rows deep. You know, like it really is magical how much connection you get with the people in that ensemble across the aisle by playing an instrument. And we really don't teach it as much. I mean, we sort of make the opportunity available by putting everybody together and playing music, but it's really something you can't replicate, right? Those moments happen, and you're always trying to get them to happen again. And sometimes they happen, and you could look back on it and go, I have no idea why we were so, as you said, why it was such a vibe, right? As opposed to the exact same music at the exact same time we were playing the next day, and it wasn't. Kind of the magic of music.
It's really beautiful. Brought tears to my eyes. Like, seriously, that was it's a really good way to describe the feeling. It's hard to capture in words what it's like to play in an ensemble.
Yeah, and then that's the reason why you become a teacher sometimes, to teach music, is because you've had that moment and you're like, I've got to get other people to have that too.
It's true. Everything that, like, trying to spread the love of orchestra and just music in general, a surprising thing that's been happening to me since, like, being in a high school string group.
Well, it's great. It's a beautiful calling if you want to do it.
I might now. I'm feeling inspired. We have a weird question for you.
Okay.
Are you a Doctor Who fan?
I am a Doctor Who fan.
We noticed the Doctor Who theme in composition of one of your pieces.
Oh my. Well, if you did, it's not intentional, because that's copyright infringement, and I totally didn't do that. Which piece? I'm curious.
Rithik, do you remember?
I don't remember which one. I just remember hearing it. I was like, whoa, is that what I think it is?
Well, good. I'm glad you don't know what piece it is because now they can't find me. So,
Perfect.
I don't need any Daleks coming to my house. So.
I love the Daleks. Such a classic figure.
Yes, and a classic figure they just will not update the look for, and I'm here for
They
it.
shouldn't. It looks perfect already the way it is. I love the use of practical effects in modern media to continue
Oh yeah,
forever.
I think everybody from Star Wars and those types of shows would love you because I agree. I think we've lost a wee bit of the magic with CGI.
My hope
So
is to go into directing films, and I would love to keep an emphasis on the music because music in film is so important, and also an emphasis on practical effects.
well,
Better.
great. I expect a call when you need some music for your film.
Of course.
Who's your favorite Doctor Who?
Oh, that's a hard one. I really like David Tennant's Doctor.
Everybody likes David Tennant. He
Well,
is the
clearly.
Doctor, right?
But then, what was the other one? He was just on Game of Thrones.
It's Matt Smith.
Matt Smith.
That's my bad.
Yes.
I am horrible with first names. Ludwig von Mozart is just right on the tip of my tongue at all given times today. So
Who's your favorite Doctor?
I'm going to be really cliche here and say it's Christopher Eccleston.
Oh.
And I also like his companion the best, Rose Tyler.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about this one. This might be my favorite one too.
It's the first iteration of the new Who, right?
Mhm.
Back after the old series, and it's just something nostalgic about it. He's so quirky with it, and I even find that it took me a minute to get into David Tennant.
Yes.
Because I was so invested. And so, yeah, I think the fact that they kept Rose on for a bit, I think that helped. Man, we are getting way off topic. Sorry.
No, this is perfect. We're going to stay on this topic for the next 40 minutes.
Another question I want to ask is going off kind of this Doctor Who. It's like you're not in it for the music. You love other things. What other hobbies do you have besides composing and publishing?
I am a video game nerd, and I say that with pride. I like to disappear into fantasy worlds and other places, and that's kind of where I spend my time outside of work, I suppose. And that goes for working on myself or working on the house or doing stuff for the fam or the animals, because I've got 3 bunnies now, 2 cats, and a dog. A little zoo at the house.
We read that on your website.
Yeah, is Oatmeal on there now? He's brand new. I don't know if I have a
Wait,
picture of
let me
Oatmeal,
check.
but I might be. We got a new bunny rabbit. My wife aptly named Oatmeal.
Can you tell us?
We caught him out by a lake.
Mhm.
He was dumped by a college student. There's a local college here, so I assume they got caught having him in the dorm. And so they dumped him, and somebody posted a picture, and it was obviously a domesticated rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went down and found him, and for like 3 days tried to catch him, and eventually got him. And now he's all home and happy. He got all his shots and all stuff, and we're trying to integrate him with the other bunnies. So, but back to your question, I like to play video games. Anything from Destiny to classic MMOs like EverQuest or Lord of the Rings Online. I'm a Tolkien fan, so.
Do you have a favorite video game?
Oh, no. No, I don't have a favorite composition either. I mean, it's whatever's fitting my fancy at the given moment. Right now I'm playing a lot of Lord of the Rings Online because I like the story and lore, and for some reason a couple weeks ago I just pulled up one of the old Peter Jackson videos, Fellowship of the Rings, and I just dove into that, and then I'm like, I want to go play Lord of the Rings a bit. So it's free for anybody who wants to play. You can go play it right now. It's just a little dated.
You should look into Baldur's Gate 3. It has a really excellent
love Baldur's
soundtrack.
Gate 3.
Oh, perfect. The soundtrack is so gorgeous.
The whole game's gorgeous.
The whole game is gorgeous. It's one of my favorites.
It's a daunting amount of options, though, for me. Everything you do has a consequence. I don't like that. It's a little too close to real life.
If you're a fan of classic games, you should try the first and the second one. They're really good.
I've played all the Baldur's Gates.
You've played all the Baldur's Gates?
I have.
I've played all the Baldur's Gates.
Well, hey, look at that. They're good. I play a lot of video games, so chances are I played a good bit of them. All kinds. My least favorite probably is sort of like the tabletop real-time strategy, which is why I'm super happy Baldur's Gate is sort of like a nice mix of that and real-time action and stuff like that. Also with impeccably beautiful art design.
Yes, it's a gorgeous game.
Yeah, and I think video games are in a way really similar to. I don't know. This might be a little bit unpopular, but in a way, I play a lot of video games too, and I feel like in a way they're really similar. In like, if you really look for it, you find that journey, and you feel like the things you can do with the music the same way, like you guide yourself in a video game.
Oh yeah, it's art, right? That's music. Art is art, and art is food for the soul and many other things, but it is art. And so, yes, video game is art, from the music to the graphics to the story to the fact that you can drift in there and be immersed. It's all art, just like music. I agree with you 100%.
And then we have one final question, which is staying on this topic. A lot of video games and movies have really classic scores, really classic just songs on them pieces. Do you have a
Hmm.
favorite out of music and video games?
A favorite piece of music from those things?
It
Is
can
that
be an
what you're asking?
album. It can be like the whole I would say the whole Baldur's Gate album is my favorite.
I'm gonna be a little weird here and go to a movie that maybe people don't know, but I encourage you all to go listen to it because I thought it was brilliant and so weirdly unique and it's not unique, but it is for Hollywood, right? It's called
Hmm.
Shutter Island, and in Shutter Island, the score is almost exclusively classical music,
Oh,
right? It's almost exclusively string quartets and orchestra from real giants of the classical string medium. It's not redone. It's not rewritten and reorchestrated. It is just these pieces, very well recorded, and they work perfectly. And I think what's beautiful to me about that is that you have these wonderful film composers like John Williams who are writing music like that. And the reason they do that is because they heard this music and they thought that would translate. And then for many, many years after kind of the rise of John Williams, and we moved on a little bit more into the Hans Zimmer sort of era
hmm,
of, a little bit less melodic focus, a little bit more drama driven, chugga choo
yes.
choo focused. I think we pulled away from that. And out of all of the music that was happening during that time, this movie came out and it was like getting hit with a sack of bricks in the theater going, wow, what is this? And it was stuff I should have known. And then afterwards, I saw the credits and went, no way, they did that? And so that's my favorite one for the shock factor, for the fact that it was so brilliantly done, and for the fact that they probably spent $0 on their music because all of that's PD, which is brilliant in and of itself.
And as for now, just finishing up, do you have any final thoughts? Something you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the fact that you two have taken time to ask such wonderful questions and, have the grace to, spend your time doing a podcast when you have so much other stuff you have to be doing because you're passionate about music is a wonderful end note for me because I left the teaching room to be a editor and composer 6 years ago, and it was a very challenging decision because I was extremely passionate about being in the classroom. And so little things like this where I get invited to come talk to you who are in the classroom, who are playing music, who are passionate about what you do, is a little trip for me back into the world of education. And the fact that my music is sometimes used still in the classroom is a beautiful thing for me. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your director. I can't wait to hear you in Midwest. I'll be there smiling in one of the rows. And again, thank you so very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
All right, you two take care and enjoy some Doctor Who for me.
Of course.
All right, bye bye, y'all.